You know, have you ever paused a modern game and just stared at it thinking, wait, is this real life? Or is this a game? It's happening more and more, right? It's just mind-blowing to think that in about 50 years, we've gone from like simple little white rectangles to these worlds that are so realistic they can actually fool your eyes. So, how on earth did we get here? Let's break it down. I mean, just look at this. Seriously, let that sink in for a second. On the left, you've got the very beginning. Simple, abstract shapes that somehow launched an entire industry. And on the right, well, that's the result of decades of genius and innovation. A world where light actually behaves like real light, creating scenes that are just breathtaking. The difference is absolutely staggering, and that's exactly what we're going to unpack. So, what was the secret sauce behind this massive leap? Well, it wasn't just one thing. Not at all. It's actually this fascinating story that weaves together brilliant hardware breakthroughs, some super clever mathematical tricks, and of course, a whole lot of pure artistic genius. And this is going to be our roadmap for the journey. We're going to walk through 6 major eras of graphics, starting with those simple glowing lines of the past and taking it all the way up to the mind-bending AI-powered lighting we see today. Okay, so let's start our journey at the very, very beginning. We're talking about a time before we even really had pixels as we know them. Back then, it was all about the simple, almost elegant beauty of glowing lines on a screen. Way back in 1958, a physicist created what many people call the first ever video game, Tennis for Two, and he did it on an oscilloscope of all things. Then you fast forward to 1972, and Pong just explodes onto the scene, bringing video games to everybody. In those early days, graphics were purely about function. I mean, could you tell what was going on? Yes? Great. Ship it. That was pretty much the philosophy. All right, let's jump ahead to the next big evolutionary step. This is where the artistry really starts to kick in, because developers had to figure out how to create entire worlds with incredibly limited tech. Welcome to the age of the pixel. So, put yourself in the shoes of a game developer in the 80s. You've got this huge idea for an epic adventure, but your toolbox is tiny. Memory is super precious, and your color palette is literally smaller than a kid's starter pack of crayons. So how do you create characters that people will still be talking about decades later? The solution was just genius, pixel art. Think of it like making a mosaic, but instead of tiles, you're using tiny colored squares on a screen. Artists would carefully, painstakingly place every single pixel to build heroes, monsters, everything. And to make a move, they used a technique called sprite animation, which is basically a digital flipbook. You flash a series of still images really fast, and poof, you've got movement. And this is where things got really, really colorful. The jump from the 8-bit consoles like the NES to the 16-bit ones like the Super Nintendo was massive. We're not talking about a small upgrade. We're talking about going from just 256 possible colors to over 65,000. That explosion of color is what let developers create those lush, vibrant, absolutely unforgettable worlds so many of us grew up in. But of course, developers weren't going to stop there. They weren't happy just painting on a flat canvas anymore. They wanted to build worlds that you felt like you could actually step into. The next giant leap for gaming was about to happen, and it was going to change, well, everything. It was time to add a third dimension. And yeah, this was a huge challenge. I mean, think about it. How do you take a world that exists in 3 dimensions and basically squash it onto your flat, 2-dimensional TV screen, but still make it feel real and let you run around in it? That was the big puzzle that defined the next whole era of gaming. The answer was actually pretty simple in concept, but unbelievably powerful in practice: the polygon, and specifically the good old triangle. Every single 3D thing you see in a game, from a character's nose to a giant skyscraper, is actually built from a web of these tiny little triangles. But to draw millions of them every single second, you needed a whole new kind of engine, and that was the graphics processing unit, or the GPU. You know, this is a fantastic way to think about it. Your computer's main processor, the CPU, is like a master surgeon, super precise, doing one complex thing at a time. A GPU, though, that's more like a giant factory floor with millions of workers all doing one simple task at the exact same time. That massive parallel power is what makes GPUs the absolute kings of rendering graphics. So we were in the third dimension. But there was a problem. Early 3D games had this certain blocky look to them, right? Everything kind of looked like it was carved out of plastic. The next big mission was to breathe some life into these digital models, to make them feel solid and textured and, real. Yeah, that plastic toy look was a real hurdle. To get past it, artists needed way more control. They needed to be able to say exactly how light should bounce off a surface, how a shadow should fall, and how to cram in tons of detail without making the whole game grind to a halt. And this problem led to this incredible wave of innovation. First, we got things like Pong shading, which was a smart way to smooth out the lighting on models and get rid of those harsh, blocky edges. Then came the real game changer, programmable shaders. This literally gave artists the power to paint with code, creating custom lighting and material effects. And on top of that, you had normal mapping, this brilliant trick to make a simple model look super detailed, which saved a ton of performance. Which brings us all the way to today, to the modern era. For decades, everything we've talked about was really a series of very, very clever illusions, tricks to fool our eyes into seeing a 3D world. But what if we could stop faking it? What if we could actually simulate the physics of light itself and create a world that follows the same rules as our own? This huge shift in thinking leads to two totally different ways of drawing a 3D scene. The classic method is called rasterization. It's a super efficient shortcut. It takes a 3D model, flattens it, and then makes a really good guess about how it should be lit. Ray tracing, though, is the real deal. It doesn't guess. It actually simulates the path of individual rays of light as they bounce all around a scene, which creates incredibly realistic lighting, shadows, and reflections. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, if ray tracing is so much better, why haven't we always used it? And the simple answer is power. It is incredibly computationally expensive. For the longest time, it was so slow that only Hollywood movies could use it, where one single frame could take hours or even days to render. Doing that in real time for a game, that was pure science fiction, until specialized hardware like NVIDIA's RT cores showed up, which were built from the ground up to do exactly that. So what's the magic recipe that makes real-time ray tracing actually work? Well, it's not just one thing. It's this powerful trio of technologies working together. First, you have the RT cores. That's the raw muscle doing the heavy math. Then you have AI denoising, which is like a cleanup crew that makes the image look perfectly clean. And finally, you have amazing AI upscaling tech, like DLS, which boosts performance like crazy so your game still runs super smooth. So after this whole trip through the history of game graphics, let's just step back and look at the big picture. How far have we actually come in terms of pure raw power? The number might actually blow your mind. Let's try to put this in perspective, okay? Back in the 70s, computers could draw maybe 1,000 triangles per second. By the 90s, we hit 1 million. In the 2000s, that number exploded to hundreds of millions of pixels per second. And today, modern GPUs can push over 100 billion pixels every single second. That isn't just a big jump. It is an exponential explosion of computing power. So you see, the journey from pixels to photorealism wasn't because of one single thing. It was this perfect storm of innovation. It was the relentless exponential growth of hardware, from CPUs to GPUs to the AI cores of today. It was the genius of mathematicians and programmers who wrote the incredible algorithms that brought these worlds to life. And, maybe most importantly, it was the boundless imagination of artists who used these incredible tools to create experiences that have stuck with us for generations. And that leaves us with the big question, what's next? Just a few years ago, the idea of full path tracing, simulating every single light ray in a scene in real time, that seemed like a far-off dream. Today, it's here. It's a reality. If we've come this far in just 50 years, what unbelievable things are we going to be seeing in the next 5? The future of gaming graphics is looking brighter and a whole lot more realistic than ever before.